Shalom, everybody. Welcome back to Harav Gottlieb's articles in the back of Giving, translation of Matan Torah. We're on page 173 in the middle. Dynamic, non-habitual. We're continuing the essay, How It Feels to Begin to Give Selflessly. And just pull up the live stream in case we have any questions, comments, or concerns throughout the class. So, the Rebbe Shlita continues from where we left off. A lot of our last class had to do with the transformation of the stony heart to the fleshy heart. Malchut to Bina, from receiving to giving, and so forth. Regarding the beginning stages of spiritual devotion, there is a distinction between the feeling when we begin to serve God by giving to other people and the feeling in our direct service of God by fulfilling mitzvot between an individual and God. Our direct service of God is fixed. For example, putting on tefillin each morning or saying the same prescribed blessings. No other person is involved who will criticize us if we fail to do what is required in this regard. And we are not put to the test of other people's shifting moods and circumstances. It's easy to get used to this form of service. And once we've acquired the habit of doing it, then it has no benefit. For service without conscious intention and thought brings no spiritual benefit. A body without a soul. In a similar light, a soul without a body is also non-moving, non-actualized. The Zohar says, one without the other is a klipa. It is a shell. It is something that is not, in essence, holy. Something distinct, something balanced, which would be both body and soul, both action with conscious intention and thought. Perhaps a good clarification is that there is a value in habitualizing ourselves and regulating ourselves to acts of giving and higher modes of consciousness. We can habitualize ourselves to value as opposed to just doing things by rote without any intention. It comes down to the conversation of quality versus quantity. We surely clarify quality over quantity. So much so the Rebbe Shlita said very recently, just clarifying the point, that just reading a single verse in Tehillim and Psalms again and again and again, and really diving into it, focusing on it, feeling it, seeing the language of the branches within it, is much more beneficial and much deeper than just reading and finishing the Tehillim itself, or finishing any number of the words themselves. If it's a matter of quantity, as opposed to the actual mind and heart connection of the quality of reading it slowly with intention, there's no comparison. Yes, reading a single verse again and again, meditatively, is much more beneficial than just speeding through it. And that's something clarified by Chazal themselves. Chazal say that better to pray less with intention than pray more without. The Rebbe Shita continues. The situation is different in the service of God that takes place between one person and another. Here our spiritual work is capable of having an effect on us. Interpersonal matters are not dependent on habit, for they change all the time. Each day the people around us make new demands, and we are tested anew. Thus, there is a preference for the service of God by an individual giving to another person, because we get feedback on the quality of our service, and so it's unlikely that we will fall into habit due to the extreme dynamics of dealing with people. There's no room for habitualizing because it's so different and so shifting, as opposed to putting on tefillin every morning or keeping Shabbat every week. There is prone to a habitualization to dryness. Now, in regards to what I'd mentioned regarding just reading one verse with intention slowly versus reading a lot fast with no intention, it is important to clarify that surely logic would presume if reading it slowly with intention is better, so too, if one can do a lot with intention and with feeling, then that's surely better than slowly and focusing on one. One can focus on the quality but do the quantity simultaneously. Of course, that's better, assuming one is on that high level. So the Rebbe Shita gave an example recently of Rebbe Aaron of Belz, who, when praying, would open up his prayer book, his siddur, and pray like this. He would just flip pages, perhaps whispering the words with extreme speed, because the prayer book was a formality for him at his level. He was completely and utterly connected to the Creator. So when he's living the Siddur, he's living the prayer book, reading it is the formality, it's going through his obligations. So he would drink his prayer in 5 minutes. Amazing to contemplate. That's not for us at our level, just an extreme example to paint the picture that such a person could have quality and quantity simultaneously. The Rebbe Shita continues. For this reason, Rabbi Akiva said that the mitzvah, and love your fellow as yourself, is the central principle of the Torah. The goal is to love God, but the way to arrive at the goal is by way of the mitzvah and love your fellow. Do we love God? One test is to see the measure of our love for other people. For it's impossible to love the Creator without loving His creations. And we see this in the writings of Rav Kook, Zatzal, and the Bala Sulam. We can see clearly in the writings a love for all of humanity, not just the Jewish people. And that's because they were at the highest level of spirituality. They were totally unified in their consciousness with the Creator. Same way that the Creator loves all His children. So too, someone at that level of refinement has a similarity of form and also loves all people. So it's a good way to gauge how close we are to the ultimate goal of loving the Creator. As to what degree do we love the other? Do we hate a particular person? Maybe even a group of people, God forbid. Do we acknowledge that the essence of every single person is something pure, supernal? And as the Baal Islam says in Otei of the introduction to Zohar, that every person has importance to no limit and is a perfectly fitting creation for the perfect Creator that made them. With that said, as seemingly evil and dark as actions of different groups of individuals could be, it is in essence the klipa that is acting. It is not their essence. A soul does not act in that way in essence. So what we may observe and dislike or even hate are the most external properties of what we think or deem to be that individual. So to focus on the goodness of all peoples and acknowledging their innermost point being their soul, we acknowledge that all of our souls are not only unified, but are one with the Creator. Then we can inch a little bit more towards a unified consciousness of loving and respecting others, other nations as well. We're all B'Tselem Elokim. B'Tselem Elokim is the numerical value, the gematria of 248. Abraham. We are all made in his image. We're all made with the potential to be like Abraham, to be chesed. The world was created by means of the Creator's chesed. Everything is his supernal kindness because he had no lack. Creator created creation in order to give goodness to creation. That's chesed. That's loving kindness. We are made in the image of that ultimate giving. Hence, B'Tselem Elokim being gematria, Abraham. And we do acknowledge that, in essence, all of humanity today, at least by the Jewish tradition, are B'nai Abraham. Fits together. Anyway, to continue. Bala Sulam states that the portion of the Torah that involves service between an individual and God is less capable of creating a spiritual healing than service between an individual and other people. By conforming to the fixed requirements of the service between an individual and God, we may deceive ourselves that we are doing a good job of serving God, even though we have simply fallen into habit. Indeed, we may have even failed to consider why we're fulfilling the mitzvot. For example, do we ask ourselves, why do we keep the Sabbath? What is the purpose of the Sabbath? Who commanded us to keep the Sabbath? If we just keep the Sabbath out of habit, there is no substantial work in transforming our nature. No one other than ourselves will comment and make us see that we are not really occupied with purifying our intentions and cleaning up our inner world. But again, we are to habitualize our quality, being our intention and thought in the action over quantity. But again, that doesn't mean we can't do both at some point in our progression. But what I draw from this is that simple questions of why am I doing this or that? In essence, allowing even this most simple of questions in regards to our action in Torah and Mitzvot to connect us to the Creator. The Rebbe Shita says that really, quoting the Rebbe Tzila, actually, if I'm not mistaken, really the work is not so hard. We just have to remember the Creator. That's it. Whether it's remembering the Creator in the midst of our inner work, thinking of the Creator in the midst of our work and our learning and our teaching, and whatever the case may be, to keep the Creator on our minds. Shiviti Hashem l'gnedei tamid. To always have the Creator before us. He continues. Then why do we need mitzvah between an individual and God at all? It seems we would be more effective in perfecting ourselves if we would invest all our efforts in interpersonal mitzvot. And there are those camps that do take that approach. But the answer is that mitzvot between an individual and God remind us that the final goal is love of the Creator. For this purpose, the whole world was created. Loving other people is the method to arrive at loving the Creator, but it is not the goal. As we learned in an earlier essay in the back here of giving, the mitzvot are also called the 613:18 and the 613 pikudin, 613 pieces of advice to escape, leave, step out of one's ego. And once we take those advices and successfully, slowly but surely, step outside of ourselves by means of the Torah and its mitzvot with intention and thought, in thought, speech, and action, and slowly inch towards the desire to give, then the mitzvah become pekudin, deposits of light. Every mitzvah has a most unique flavor that we can taste. The reason we don't taste it in the midst of our work alludes to our coarseness and our lack of refinement. And at times, the Creator wishes to put us in such conditions because the purpose of the light is found specifically in the darkness. And that the darkness is of value because it brings us the value of the light. We appreciate the light more. So many of us pray for light. We want the pleasure. We want the illumination. But in regards to the inner work, just to focus on the serving of the other and service of the Creator, we should be requesting, as strange as it sounds, darkness. And it's not that we're requesting to be depressed, God forbid. We're requesting awareness. Awareness of our ego. Awareness of our coarseness and the degree to which we are separated from the Creator. The more aware we become, the closer we'll be to a broken heart. Not a shattered heart, not a depressed heart, God forbid, but a broken heart. Broken heart is very sweet, says Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Broken heart is what can cry out a true prayer, a prayer from the depths of the heart. Me'umka deliba. And that true prayer, as our rabbis have explained, can bring us to Yetzias Mitzrayim, exiting of Egypt, transformation of consciousness from a constricted, self-serving one to an altruistic, serving others one. Furthermore, this method, loving people, is based on our love of the Creator in 3 different ways. A. God is the source of the requirement to love other people. If not for God's mitzvah to love others, we would not see the necessity for this. Human ethics is no reliable anchor, for its demands are open to change and are in fact extremely fluid. I think we see this very clearly in today's society. Literally, people are very fluid. If you catch what I'm saying. In all dimensions. It's not something founded on a strong base, on a tradition. Of course, from our perspective, one that dates back to Torah itself being received by Moshe Rabbeinu. But I'm not going there too deep. what I would like to say is that we have several examples of famous ethical teachers, ones who were big names in the conversation of ethics as it was taught to the world, who, relative to societal norms, fell and did things that society did not agree with their actions. And the responses were, just because I teach it doesn't mean I live it, or that I have to live it. Which I think is a great example of the emptiness of ethics in itself, and truly the emptiness of anything, arguably, if not connected to Source, the Creator, the purpose of refining and climbing up the spiritual ladder to reach the Creator. B. The technique that creates love of another. The technique that creates love of another person is to see that God is really the one who is directing that person's actions. Therefore, all our relationships to the other person is actually a relationship to God, who is enclosed within him or her. Without this outlook, there is nothing that can cause us to put other people's needs above our own. This is so deep and so important. I think this is a meditation that we should employ to the best of our ability. I think by the fact that the Baal Shalom said, one should imagine to oneself that there are only two things in creation, themselves and the Creator. This exact point, meaning you, the listener, are the only thing that exists in the world, and everything outside of yourself is the Creator. So every relationship that we have, every event that's ever happened, is happening, or will happen, is all the Creator interacting with us, speaking to us, calling out to us. It's a worthy meditation. It's a worthy thing to regulate. It's part of Emunah consciousness to regulate our Emunah, our belief that the Creator is right here, right now, and even more so to this point, that all of our relationships are based on a relationship with the Creator. The Creator is inspiring the others to act with us in very particular ways for our benefit, for our growth, to challenge us, for us to go against our desire, for us to attempt to be giving, so on and so forth. So, to that point, as I referenced earlier in the lesson about other nations or other peoples that we might dislike, and how the extent of our love for others is a good barometer as to where our love for the Creator is. So again, if everyone outside of ourselves is God and clothed in those individuals, then let's take the extreme example of terrorists. Do we point the finger and say, oy voy voy, such evil terrorists? Or do we contemplate that it is God enclosed within those people? There are certain processes of reality that are happening, and it's fair to ask, why is it happening? How is this happening? For what purpose? Rebbe Seinu, the Baal Sulam, the Rebbe Zatzal, the Rebbe Shlita teach in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, who is bringing ideas from the Zohar, that the world is a mirror, and what we see outside is truly within. And we can interpret everything, both Tanakh itself, the Torah as we know it, as well as the events that happen in the world, as a reflection of things that are happening within each and every one of us. As Chazal say, our sages say, man is a small world. With that said, when extreme moments, God forbid, lo aleinu, should not happen to any of us, but when terrorism happens and atrocities happen, it's a description, it's a reflection of certain aspects of ourselves terrorizing different aspects of ourselves, being the aspects of our egoism terrorizing, trying to kill, and take control of the innermost pure point of ourselves, being the soul. It's the beast within trying to control, kill, and plunder the godliness within. Which is why the Rebbe Shlita has said recently, in the midst of a learning in Shabbos, reading from Shamati, a book written by the Rebbe Zatzal and other students of the Baal Sulam, all the great Torah that they heard from the Baal Sulam, that hate is an emotion that separates. When we feel hate for another, we naturally feel distant from them. And this is a separate point that wasn't brought in the class, but the Baal Shem Tov teaches that there's no such thing as a bad character trait. There are only character traits used badly. So also hate has a most holy kernel, a most holy root that's to be used, employed. The same way that hate is a mechanism that separates. So we are to employ that tool to that which is not serving the Creator, serving us to reach that goal of serving the Creator, unifying with Him. In essence, our ego, our will to receive for itself alone. The more we become aware of it, and the more aware of the extent to which it separates us from the Creator, so we grow to hate it, because it causes us so much suffering. And the more we hate our will to receive for itself alone, the more separated we become from it. So as opposed to hating others, God forbid, or hating nations and what have you, better to reflect on what that is represented as within and begin to hate those aspects within. The aspects of the false self, the illusory self, in contrast to the true self, which is the pure, untouchable, supernal, eternal soul. C. Whenever there is a conflict between giving to another person and God's mitzvah, we certainly must give preference to God and not the person. For the goal is not loving people, but loving God. Only where the two matters of loving God and loving other people coincide, then the whole affair of loving others is transformed to be spiritually beneficial. However, when they are separated, there is no spiritual benefit at all in loving others. Even the love of others has to be connected with intention, with thought, with the energy of serving the Creator and coming to unify in consciousness with the Creator, to refine ourselves. If it's just loving for the sake of loving, then it doesn't provide a spiritual benefit. And we get deeper into it as the essay continues. Just want to check over here in the live stream, see what we're holding. Finish up this section. From this we understand that certainly we need to keep the mitzvah between an individual and God. But the interpersonal mitzvot create sensitivity within us that prevents the mitzvot between an individual and God from becoming habitual. Thus, we should keep the mitzvot between an individual and God, and with God's help, we eventually will acquire the ability to keep them in sincere devotion. Zat Hashem, B'karov. Speaking soon. The next subsection of the essay is contrary to our nature. And then we'll continue from there. We got 2 short essays after that for this section. And we'll see where we go after that. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for keeping up. If anyone ever has any questions or inquiries, you can always email me. My email is in the description. It should be adampalanovsky@gmail.com. Haven't referenced it in a while. There's also a link to the website of Avraham Lowenthal, who's a great friend of ours, longtime student of the Rebbe Shlita, who has translated other works into English for free PDF download. And if you're in Israel, please swing by his art studio in Sfat. Amazing stuff over there. You can get the books also in your hands for a great price. But the art is really nice. Anyway, all the best.